Hello friends, it is indeed my pleasure to welcome all of you to today's discussion on the constitutional history of France and Switzerland, a review. The basic thrust of this lecture is to seek an understanding of the constitutional history and political traditions of France and Switzerland and analyze their role in shaping political principles and the role played by them in the organization of their respective governments. We have taken up this topic today as part of topic 3 of paper 4, that is comparative government and politics. At the very outset, it needs to be mentioned that while France is one of the oldest nation states in Europe and is often considered to be a laboratory of political experiments due to constant regime changes, Switzerland, on the other hand, being a small state and lying at the heart of Europe, is a state which is marked more by coherence and ardent nationalism despite differences in race, religion and language. In this context, Bryce rightly mentions that Switzerland has one of the most superior democracies in the world, despite being subjected to the influence of French Revolution and also being influenced by Romanish, Italian and Austrian traditions from time to time. Against this background, in today's discussion, we have attempted to discuss significant political events which are important for analyzing the constitutional history and political traditions of France and Switzerland. Now, while focusing on the first section, that is the constitutional history of France, at the very outset it needs to be mentioned that French constitutional history is marked by extreme changes in governmental patterns, ranging from regime changes to simple modifications brought about by constitutional revision from time to time. It is very interesting to note that since 1789, that is the French Revolution, France has already had 12 regimes and 13 constitutions. The period of extremes ranging from revolutionary regimes followed the storming of the Bastille in 1789 and ended with the seizure of power by Napoleon a decade later. The French Revolution, in fact, is the key to the understanding of French politics and society from past to the present. However, for the purpose of interest, it is important to note that the pre-revolutionary era was marked by centralized control by the famous Bourbon monarchy. The revolution, that is the famous French Revolution, took place in July 1789, which was followed by a lot of revolutionary and reformist changes. And one of such change was the restriction and reform of the feudal prescriptions of the state and drawing up of the famous Declaration of the Rights of Man, which is very significant in the constitutional history of France since it made monarchy a constitutional one. In this context, it needs to be noted that the first written constitution of France for the first time was drawn up in 1791, but tragically it failed despite being a liberal constitution. The next year, monarchy was abolished and France was declared a republic. The Directory took over the administration of France in 1795 and it was replaced soon, however, by a 3-member consulate headed by Napoleon in 1799, who finally became omnipotent and seized political power. He was crowned the Emperor of France in 1804, and the paradox of the situation from the point of view of political analysis lies in the fact that the French people, who at one time revolted against autocracy, gracefully accepted the centralized administrative pattern brought about Napoleon on grounds of administrative efficiency. Napoleon governed France till 1814. He was overthrown by Louis XVIII, and who, however, soon came into conflict with the people and was overthrown in 1830. The Charter of 1830, however, also failed to win the support of the people, and Louis Philippe was, however, overthrown by another uprising which took place in 1848. A constitution for the Second Republic was now drafted by the National Assembly, and Louis Napoleon was elected as president by universal suffrage. In 1852, the Republic came to an end when he declared himself to be Napoleon III, that is, the Emperor of France, and ruled till 1870. A provisional government working under organic laws was now under operation in France from 1870 to 75. Within 5 years, a new constitution was established which not only accepted a republican government but also made the constitution a rigid one which could not be brought about or changed by any kind of constitutional amendment from time to time at will. The rigid constitution finally set up the republic, which signified now in France a transition and a shift of and a victory of republicanism over monarchism. The constitution of the Third Republic provided for a president and a bicameral legislature. The president, however, enjoyed a position which was very similar to the British Queen. Every act signed by the President of France of the Third Republic had to be countersigned by a minister. The Third Republic, it is interesting to note, lasted for a period of 70 years. However, it was marked by cabinet instability, a socially conservative republic, and a system of government which could not be altered by constitutional means in any way. Once the Republicans got control of the regime, they refused to accept any kind of change and any kind of monarchical rule in future or any kind of measure which would be considered to be anti-republicanism and counter-revolutionary. The Third Republic collapsed in the year 1940, and on August 1945, the French government issued an ordinance regarding electoral laws. In 1946, however, on 27th October, we find that a new constitution was ratified and promulgated. The constitution of the Fourth Republic remained in force from 46, that is 1946 to 1958, but was based on a compromise formula of political parties and on a adjustment principle between various political parties. The constitution of the Fourth Republic declared France a republic which was to be indivisible, secular in nature, and democratic in spirit. It was based on the sovereignty of the people and was rigid in nature. The position of the cabinet and the prime minister, however, was raised by the constitution of the Fourth Republic. Despite the fact that the constitution of the Fourth Republic was expected to overcome the drawbacks of the Third Republic, it failed to do so. This primarily happened due to political divisions, constitutional deadlocks from time to time, and unstable cabinets of the French government. De Gaulle, we find, right from the beginning in 1958, refused to accept the constitution of the Fourth Republic and in fact was quite critical about it. Ultimately, on May 15th, 1958, he declared that he was ready to assume the powers of the Republic with a view to ensure the integrity of the nation, and on June 1st, 1958, he appeared in the Assembly as Prime Minister designate with complete powers to govern by decree for a period of 6 months, during which a new constitution was to be drawn up on the basis of principles and orientation and ideas put forward by de Gaulle. The Fourth Republic, thus under the leadership of de Gaulle, soon was transformed into the Fifth Republic through a very non-violent and in a very peaceful way. De Gaulle formed a national cabinet and included the most prominent men of France. He, in fact, undertook the task of drafting a new constitution and gave it to Michel Debre, the most trusted man of de Gaulle. On September 4th, 1958, we find that de Gaulle presented to the people the draft of the constitution that actually had been prepared under his authority. And in October, he delivered a very momentous speech in Paris, through which won, in fact, a lot of support and applause from the French people. Despite several unfavorable comments on the constitution of the Fifth Republic, however, it was accepted soon by the majority. It was reflected as a victory of de Gaulle, who was elected the first president of the Fifth Republic in December 1958, and his trusted follower Debre soon became the premier. The above analysis, in fact, has given us a review of significant changes and shifts that have taken place in the Constitution of France from time to time. But however, no discussion on the French Constitution would ever be complete unless we take into account certain significant events in the recent past. For the constraint of time and for the purpose of convenience, however, I have included two most significant events, that is the era under Chirac, which ended in 2007, and the government under his successor, Sarkozy. Chirac served France as president since 1995. When he left in the year 2007 in March, France had to tackle the challenges of a state faced by an unachieving economy, heavy debt and social tensions. Nicolas Sarkozy, his successor, a younger politician, however, emerged and tackled the situation in a very, very brave way by focusing upon the youth section of the French population. As a result, Sarkozy won with a huge majority and soon became the French president. Sarkozy can surely be credited for attempting to improve the political situation in France and fostering a spirit of cooperation among the different countries. And in fact, he is famous for his Paris speech in the Mediterranean in the year 2008, which fostered the spirit of cooperation, mutual trust, and exchange between the countries of the North and the South. France, in fact, has signed various vital agreements with countries like India and USA and other states, among which the agreement on civil cooperation in 2008 between India and France remains worth mentioning. In 2012, however, Sarkozy was defeated by a socialist leader, Francois Hollande. With that, we conclude a brief discussion of the constitutional history and the political traditions and significant events of the French Constitution and turn our attention now to section 2 of the present lecture and our discussion, that is the constitutional history of Switzerland, a very small state in Central Europe, and for that matter, a very tiny one which has grown over the years through intermingling of different cultures and traditions being influenced by its neighbors in different ways. The Republic of Switzerland, which lies in the heart of Europe, is one of the small nations of the world. It shares a lot of its history and culture with its neighbors, Germany, France, Italy, and Austria in different ways. A very interesting feature about Switzerland is that despite differences between language and religion, the Swiss people have come together and have intermingled and have squeezed, as Monroe rightly points out, into one race and have lived up and built up a very coherent kind of nationalism with no differences, no compromise, but complete adjustment. The Swiss people, in fact, speak 4 different languages, but a healthy tradition of self-rule has been established successfully in Switzerland. In fact, the intermingling of different cultures and languages have had a positive impact on the growth of nationalism in Switzerland to a great extent, and it has fostered, as Zuka rightly points out, the spirit of tolerance among the Swiss people in a very predominant way. The Swiss have a long tradition of freedom, and it represents a perfect example of how a coherent state can develop despite linguistic and other differences. A strong democracy with a spirit of direct elections has developed in Switzerland and giving fundamental rights to the people and people enjoying a lot of freedom. In fact, Bryce, noting the superior nature of democracies and the success with which it is functioning, Monroe also supports Bryce, and Bryce says in his work, that is Modern Democracies, that Switzerland offers perhaps the most best example of a democratic model in the world in contemporary times. Switzerland is a product of the process of unification which had begun in 1291 and ended in the year 1848. Prior to 1291, Switzerland lacked any kind of central coordinating authority. They were loose cantons which were totally under the allegiance of the Habsburg rulers of Austria. However, 3 cantons, among which Uri is very significant, followed by Squiz and Unterwalden, constituted a confederation with the objective of safeguarding their liberties and coming out of any kind of Austrian control. The formation of the confederation encouraged later 8 and later 13 cantons to join the confederation by 1648, and Switzerland as an independent sovereign state soon came to be recognized by the Treaty of Westphalia. However, Switzerland soon ceased to be a confederation and became a protectorate after the conquest by the French army. The centralized nature of rule that was introduced by the French, however, was quite incompatible with the local traditions which were liked by the Swiss people, and that caused great dissatisfaction and irritation with the freedom-loving Swiss people. As a result, the French under Napoleon were forced to restore independence by the Act of Mediation, and the Helvetic Republic came to an end. The Congress of Vienna in 1815 recognized the revived confederation in a modified form. The foundations of modern Switzerland, however, was laid between 1798 and 1815 in a predominant way. Between 1815 and 1848, however, a regular strife continued between the centrifugal and centripetal forces, and ultimately a civil war broke out and a new constitution had to be drawn up, which became now the fundamental law of Switzerland. Historically, the groundwork for today's Swiss constitution was laid with the promulgation of the Constitution of 12 September 1848, which was influenced by the ideas of the US Constitution on the one hand and the French Revolution on the other. The Confederation, however, was soon converted into a federal state, however, on the basis of a compromise formula. The Constitution of 1848 was partly revised in 1866 and completely in the year 1874. This took place primarily because centralization continued despite the Federalists pleading for special privileges for the cantons. The radical wished, however, the abolition of such privileges and rights. The revised constitution, however, continued with the policy of centralization, and since 1891, however, Switzerland introduced a new feature, that is the right of initiative, under which, giving importance to the principle of freedom and upholding it in a great way, and upholding and fostering the democratic spirit of the Swiss Federation, a certain number of voters were given the right to make suggestions or requests to amend a constitutional article or even introduce a new article in the constitution, which came to be known as the Federal Popular Initiative. The federal constitution, however, was wholly revised for the second time in the 1990s, and a new version of the present constitution has been produced in the year 1999 of 18th April. It replaced the constitution of 29th May 1874 and contains 9 fundamental rights. It came into force on January 2000. Thus, Switzerland entered into a new millennium with a new foundation, with new ideas, but the significance of the Swiss constitution lies in the fact that it did not alter in any way the basic structure that was there of the 1848 original constitution. The basic purpose of the 1999 Constitution, which was promulgated in the year 2000, was to codify the fundamental laws together that had emerged over time. One of the most prominent aspects of the 1999 Constitution has been the inclusion of fundamental rights in a predominant way, and also, in addition to codifying the fundamental rights, the 1999 Constitution allows for a federal popular initiative by which 100,000 eligible voters are in a position to suggest partial and full revisions of the Constitution. The Constitution of 1999 till date was last amended in the year 2012. However, it needs to be noted that although the 1999 Constitution includes modern updates and revisions, much of the structure and the pattern of governance in Switzerland has remained the same following the dictates and the principles of the 1848 Constitution. This has been particularly prominent in the areas of regulating internal relations, diplomatic relations, and political and foreign relations. With that, we conclude briefly our discussion of the constitutional history and political traditions and the growth and evolution of the Swiss constitution in a predominant way. I shall conclude my discussion on the constitutional history of France and Switzerland by putting forward certain observations of my own. There is no doubt that the Swiss constitution has been deeply influenced by the ideas of the French Revolution in a predominant way, besides being influenced by the other influences of its neighbors like Italy, Austria, and other countries. In comparing the two constitutions, it clearly appears that while France has been subjected to a lot of political experimentation and has faced a situation of terrible turmoil, revolutions due to unstable regimes and constant shifts and transitions in its powers and in its governmental patterns, Switzerland, on the other hand, despite being influenced by the ideals of the French Revolution, has till date successfully functioned as one of the most successful democracies in the world, on the one hand, and is known for its coherence, ardent nationalism in a predominant manner, which survives on the twin principles of compromise and adjustment above crude majoritarianism. Thank you.